problem with Bigfoot is the same problem that I have with... No, I don't believe. But it's the same problem that I have with UFOs. Yeah. The problem is I am very biased. Look, there's a fucking UFO right behind me. Very, very biased. There's a UFO on the ground. The sport model from Bob Lazar, when he found in the Area S4, Area 51. Okay. I am... I'm a romantic in that way. I want to believe in stupid shit. Right. I do. So I have to be careful. I have to be careful in what do I actually believe versus what do I want to believe. Like, what does the data show me? And the data shows me, especially what I know now from being a hunter for 12 years and spending a lot of time in the woods and knowing how many people are out there and how many people have phones and cameras and how many trail cameras there are. We have like real accurate. There's only 2 jaguars in North America. They know exactly where they are. Like, you telling me? Just telling me this fucking giant ape is wandering around Seattle
without anybody seeing him? Right.
It's just not likely. Also, there's a bunch of also reasonable explanations. First of all, have you ever been to the Pacific Northwest? You've been
I've been to Seattle.
The woods up there are fascinating because it's essentially a rainforest. So there's so much rain that the forest is dense like these things. Like, it's like a box of Q-tips. That's what I always describe it. It's like there's no spaces. It's just trees everywhere. It's just, there's no like big open spaces where you know, if you go to Montana, you go to the woods, you know, there's mountains and there's trees. There's like space in between the trees. There's no fucking space up there. It's a rainforest. It's like this. You don't see shit. And bears are known commonly to walk on 2 legs. They do it all the time. I've seen bears. Personally, with my own eyes, I've seen bears in the woods walk on 2 legs. They do it all the time. So if you're looking in between all these trees and something 100 yards away is going in between trees and standing up tall, you just saw a big bear. Right. Meanwhile, you saw a black bear.
Exactly.
Normal, everyday, average black bear standing on its back legs. They do it all the time, and they could easily be 7 feet tall.
So, you know, earlier we were talking about how would you change your opinion once you have a position that's anchored.
Yeah.
So, and now we're saying, you know, I'd love to believe in this stuff, but then incoming information comes in, and then I kind of have to accept the fact that I can't believe this stuff. Well, that, in a sense, was the exact topic of my doctoral dissertation. I actually celebrated 30 years in 2024.
What examples did you use?
So I brought in subjects to the lab. So let me tell you what the topic was, and I'll tell you how I ran it. So the idea was to study what are called stopping strategies, which means when is it that a person has acquired enough information to stop a choice. Now, why is that important? Because classical economics argues that if you're going to maximize your utility when you're making a decision, you should look at all. You can't choose the card that maximizes your utility if you leave some information unturned. So that's called the normative theory, meaning that's how you ought to behave normatively if you want to be a perfect decision maker, a rational decision maker. But objectively speaking, that's not what we do, right? You and I, every decision that we make every day, we don't sample all of the relevant and available information before we make a choice. We sample until we have sufficiently differentiated between the choices that you say, there's no point in sampling more information. I now have enough information to vote for Trump. I have enough information to marry this to choose this. So that's called the stopping strategy. So I was studying the strategies that people use when they're making a stopping decision. And so what I did, to answer your question of how I went into it, I brought in people and I made them make sequential binary choices. Binary choices means it's a choice between 2 alternatives. Sequential means that they acquire one piece of information at a time from these 2 alternatives. This was done on a computer, and it's called the process tracing algorithm. Track of every single behavior that the decision maker is making. And so what I was looking at, they could acquire up to 25 attributes, let's say choosing between partners, and I was tracking the cognitive processes that they were using to decide when to stop and choose apartment A, choose apartment B. And then later, I applied that to other decisions. example, matrix, right? So you can apply to anything. You can apply to fitness instructors choosing between political candidates to vote for anything, right? Mm-hmm. The reason why it's binary is because it only operates once you're down to 2 final alternatives. You might have used another process to work on 10 alternatives. Like, let's say the primaries in the U.S. system, we first go through Republican primary, then we choose one final one, and then we go through Democratic primary, we choose one, and then the final 2 go head-to-head. That's when my model comes in. And so my model really explains how we make decisions across a bewildering number of cases, specifically how we stop and say, I'm marrying her, I'm hiring him, I'm going for him. So it was a
So it's kind of giving point of information, like when you have enough information to make rational quality decision.
Exactly. So what you do actually is you set, I mean, if I could show it to you on a curve, it would really be cool. It's you set a what's called a differentiation threshold, which basically says that I have now sufficiently pieced apart the Mazda and the Toyota that I've hit that threshold, that I'm sufficiently convinced that that decision would never be overturned, even if I sampled all of the remaining information.
That's a good for example, because when people are looking at cars and they're trying to figure it out, like you start going over, especially today, start going over all the details and different things they do, and then you get online, like what's more reliable, you know, yeah.
And some people use what's called the core attributes heuristic, which basically is there might be 60 attributes that I might look at in a car, but I really care only about 4 attributes. I will sample those 4, whichever car is ahead after those 4, I'll buy that car. And so I studied all of those decision rule strategies.
What about emotions though? Doesn't that play in there?
Great question. So later, once I had gotten my PhD, I started incorporating various types of emotional states to see where people shift those stopping thresholds. So one thing I did, it never got published, and we can talk about that. So I wanted to look at what happens to those stopping thresholds for dysphorics. Do you know what dysphorics mean?
Like gender dysphoria?
No, not gender dysphoria, emotion. So dysphoria is like a mild state of a clinical depression. It's not, I'm going to kill myself, but my wife left me, my dog died, life sucks. So that's called dysphoria. It's the opposite of euphoria. So there is a psychometric scale that you could administer to people to measure their dysphoria scores. And so I wanted to see whether non-dysphorics, people who don't suffer from dysphoria, would make their stopping decisions in a different way than dysphorics. And I didn't have any a priori hypotheses. Why? Because the literature was very confused. Some theories said that dysphorics, by virtue of them being helpless and apathetic, like such, will actually acquire less information before they commit to a choice. Then there was another school of thought that thought, no, dysphorics are so helpless that one of the ways that they can gain control over their lives is to look at more information. So because I couldn't come up with any a priori hypotheses, and being an honest scientist, I said, I'm not going to posit any hypotheses. I'm just going to run it and see what I get. So I think I had 18 different measures that were comparing the dysphorics, maybe 17 measures that were comparing the dysphorics to the non-dysphorics, of which on 16 out of the 17, I got no effect, right? Now that to me was worthy of publishing, meaning that in this particular task, dysphoria doesn't seem to moderate the behavior. I sent it to this top journal, actually called Cognition and Emotion. You were asking about emotion. The editor writes back to me, Gad, gorgeous study, beautiful design, beautiful. Unfortunately, given the number of null effects you got, I can't publish it. Now, this is literally called in science the null effects bias, or the drawer, which means what? You only end up publishing findings that give you an effect, and you put into the disappearance bin all of the findings that didn't get any effects. So when you then run a meta-analysis, you know what a meta-analysis is? When you run a meta-analysis, it's not an actual accurate depiction of the totality of findings, because all of those null effect studies were never published. And so I tried to tell the psychologist in question, who, by the way, several years later, he was at USC, and was hounding me because he's a super wokester. I couldn't believe how much he fell in my esteem. But anyways, that's a separate. I won't even mention his name, although he's worthy of being shamed on the Joe Rogan show. And I wrote to him, I said, but I really think that, you're succumbing to the null effects bias because it's worthy to publish this. This was, I think, in 1998. It's information. It's information that is worthy of certainly the scientific community should know about it. Well, I probably, one of the first times I ever discussed this was on the show. Hopefully it gets that attention, but it's not in the record. What a shame.
That is a shame. This episode is brought to you by ZipRecruiter. It's that time again. We all look ahead and plan out what we want to accomplish in the new year. There's the usual resolutions like wanting to travel more, get a promotion, or get healthier, which I think is a good thing to do any time of year. If your goal is to hire more talented people for your business, though, you've got it pretty easy because you can use ZipRecruiter. You can even try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/Rogan. When it comes to hiring, ZipRecruiter does a lot of the work for you. It's powerful, matching technology works fast to find candidates for your role. There's also a feature that lets you invite top candidates to apply for your job. That's a smart way to encourage people to apply sooner. Here's to a new year of hiring made easier with ZipRecruiter. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. See for yourself. Go to this exclusive web address to try ZipRecruiter for free. Go to ZipRecruiter.com/Rogan. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/ROGAN. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. It's interesting that one of our biggest hurdles is the human ego does not want us to ever be wrong.
Right.
It's a giant hurdle. And human beings, for whatever reason, I guess it's part of the motivation of acquiring information and of advancing your ideas. We attach ourselves to ideas. And one of the things that I always tell young people is you want to do better in life and not get tricked by your own bullshit. Don't be married to your ideas. Ideas are just ideas. You are not your ideas. Ideas are some things that you fuck around with in your head and you explore and you talk about with your friends. But you have to always be honest about them and never be attached to them. The problem with ideas is that ideas are just like everything else. Human beings grab them and they're stingy and they're like, mine. I want my idea to win. And you'll lie so your idea wins. And it'll advance your career if your idea wins. And if you can, even if you can unfairly dismiss or you can be unethical in how you're ignoring certain aspects of data for your opposing idea. People do that and succeed because of that, because academia rewards them, the media rewards them, especially if they can publish in the New York Times or something like that. Like if they can make a story, like you'll get rewarded for lying.
So I can tell you a million. This is my 31st year as a professor. I can read a paper, and I can just by looking at how clean their presentation of the data is, tell you because the structure of the reality of data is never as clean as how it is presented in many of these journals. And then, by the way, not to sort of tap myself on the shoulder, but some of the top people that I know who ended up getting caught for fabrication of data, I was in private service saying, I bet you 80% of this guy's research is bullshit, and then it comes out to be the case. Because I'll give you an example. So I did a study, and speaking about being wedded to your ideas, so I had a graduate student that worked with me on a really, really cool project, which we ended up publishing in 2004. Really cool. I noticed that as we were getting ready to run these studies, there was always a delay where he wasn't yet ready to kind of cast the dot. And so one day we had gone for coffee. He said, you know what, I think that many people are afraid that if right now, in the rarefied world of us having just positive hypotheses, but not run the study, we live in a world where it hasn't been falsified yet. So you're wedded to the idea. But I think you're scared that if we run the studies and the data doesn't come out in support, then but guess what? It doesn't matter because we're going to reap some benefit of it as well. And he looked at me and he was like, actually, you're exactly right, Professor. I'm afraid to find out whether we're correct or not. I said, just let's do it. It was actually a study on, so there was 2 parts of the study. And I'm not sure if I've ever discussed it with you. So I wanted to look at what happens to men's testosterone levels when they engage in acts of conspicuous consumption, and what happens to men's testosterone when they see other men engaging in acts of conspicuous consumption. And the general story, as you might imagine, is when I engage in an act of conspicuous consumption, my testosterone goes up because I had a social win. And when I see you, who's a competitor to me, getting into a fancy Maserati, then my tail goes between my legs. So
you feel bad.
So my testosterone goes down. So we designed 2 gorgeous studies. We ran them. It was gorgeous. It was beautiful. By the way, I always joke that for study 1, we actually had people drive a Porsche that we rented and a beaten up old sedan. And after each driving condition, we took salivary assays so that we could measure the testosterone. And I always joke, try to get from a granting agency research funds so that you could rent a Porsche. Now, only when you can do that, you're a good scientist. Anyways, and so we ran the studies, and several of the hypotheses that we posited turned out to be veridical, but several were falsified. But to the credit of the editor, unlike the other guy, he found value in even the findings that were contrary to what we had expected, because we had an post hoc explanation as to why it didn't work out. And so, lesson to everybody who is an aspiring scientist: always be honest. Don't fudge the data. Don't go back and pretend that you had hypothesized the stuff after you see what the data results are.
Oh, is that what they do?
As a matter of fact, I told this whole story to your point.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful because we rely on experts. And a lot of times experts are just like everybody else. They're competing with these other experts and they're trying to get ahead and they're willing to bullshit. And also there's financial reward in bullshitting. There's people that would like them to bullshit a little bit and make it a lot easier for us to pass this thing that we're trying to do a little bullshitting.
Exactly. I'll add something else. Actually, I'm giving a talk at one of the universities here in Austin as part of this trip. And I'm going to talk about I'm old enough at this point of life, like to think that I still have many years left, but that I can sort of look back at, what are some of the great things that I've faced as a professor? What are some of the things that I'm disappointed in? Probably the number one thing that most disappoints me in my fellow academics, and I don't mean that as a haughty thing, is how non-intellectual most of them are just playing the game. I mean, obviously they're intelligent in the sense that they've got their PhD, they've got their professorship, they are stay-in-your lane professors, they know the little methodology, but you can't sit with them at a party and talk about things that is not within their area of expertise. They're not these big polymaths, they're not Leonardo da Vinci, and so that has disappointed me because sort of my fantasy becoming academic was that every Friday Shabbat dinner I'd be inviting all of these intellectual colleagues of mine, and my children would be growing up hearing the art historian, mathematician, and my children and I are immersed in an endless orgy of ideas all day, whereas most professors are just sort of mundane, publish or perish, get tenure, gain the system. And so that left me with a very, and that's why I do my thing, because I don't play those games, and so that's been disappointing.
Well, that competition, it creeps into medical science as well. And the really scary thing, I was reading about this case where this doctor was treating people for cancer that didn't have cancer. And he was giving chemotherapy to all these people that didn't have cancer. And when they confronted him, one of the things that he said is, you have to eat what you kill in this business. Wow. So it was essentially, he was saying, in order to thrive as a cancer doctor, he had to diagnose more people with cancer than actually had cancer. And he was, in some way, and if not justifying, explaining the thought process that led him to do this, which is so crazy to think that. But that's the reality of being a person. It's like your ego and your mind, the justifications that you can make for doing certain things. I mean, this is why we have war, right? This is what war is, the ultimate expression of that justification for the most horrific things, because you believe it's the right thing to do.
Exactly.
Or because it benefits you, or because if you don't, something's going to happen. You know, and
well, I always say, and you might have seen it posted on the next, I always say the most dangerous force in nature are parasitized minds.
Yeah.
Right? The tsunami is devastating, but it's a one bleep.
Well, what's interesting about you and your work is you predicted essentially the entire COVID reaction and the freak out and the woke mob, the whole left freak out way before it was going on. You caught like the first sounds of the drums in the far distance. You're like, guys, we got to get the fuck out of here. And everybody's like, relax. I don't hear any drums. And you're like, dude, I heard drums.
I mean, that
Viking drums.
That is literally my autobiography.
Yeah, well, that's what you did. You really did do that. You were way ahead of it, and you were widely criticized by a bunch of those people who turned out to be these woke dipshits. They eventually fell into the trance, and they all, put their fucking bios on their gender bios and their Twitter.
Trans, T-R-A-N-C-E.
Yeah, the trans.
But they fell into the trance of trans, T-R-A-N-S.
Well, trans was just the ultimate expression of this preposterous idea.
Yeah.
This inclusion, like this idea that the more suppressed you are, or the more maligned you are, the more social credit we have to give you.
Yeah.
And this is in the name of equity. So we bump a biological male who thinks he's a woman ahead of actual biological women, to the point where it's like literally victimizing these women, and we ignore it. We try to pretend it doesn't happen, whether it's in schools or in the workplace, and that's the ultimate expression of this ability to completely ignore reality because it doesn't align with your ideology.
Well, so I have some good news. Not phenomenal news, but in the same way that there's now this cataclysmic change that's happening because of Trump and so on, DEI is out and so on. I'm definitely seeing certainly a growing number of institutions that are reaching out to me who are suddenly very interested and keen on speaking with me.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, so that's wonderful, and not in a gleeful sense of, hey, I was right, but in the sense that,
well, hey, you were right. First of all, hey, you were right.
No, but we're redirecting the ship. People are waking up. Yeah. So it's not just about me. And so like this year, I'm a visiting professor and global ambassador at Northwood University. I took a leave from my home university because I couldn't stand the Hamas crazies and so on. And if you go to that school, you'll be hard pressed to see one person. There are, University of Austin here is trying to do big things. There are several other schools.
How's that going?
It's coming along. There are, it had hit a bit of a couple of obstacles, but I think things are moving.
Now, was the idea behind the University of Austin? I only peripherally know what's going on. I know the
Yeah.
So what are they trying to do? Are they trying to have a real university, like every other university?
Completely real universities. Actually, they're now, I think they just admitted their first class of 2028. Fully accredited. And the idea is to return to broad, classical, liberal, not in liberal in the political sense, but like you read the ancient Greek stories, you read Homer, you read Socrates, Aristotle, like real basic without any comparison. But it's not just enhancing warp school, it's a return to that broad education. I was reading some of the stuff that founded college, right? And no disrespect to Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. When you read stuff that Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, James Madison wrote, those were letters. They can quote Cicero and so on. Well, I think what University of Austin, I haven't gotten to visit yet, but my understanding is that they're trying to create students who are really critical thinking abilities. So it's not just a correction to the woke stuff, but let's return to meaningful, well-grounded, all-encompassing education. And if they pull it off, what a great thing.
Yeah, education is not supposed to be just indoctrination. It's supposed to be giving you a broad perspective on a bunch of different ways that people look at the world. And what we know about the world, that's a fact.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to be able to form your own conclusions. The way you're supposed to be able to do that, you're supposed to see people of different ideologies debate and have conversations about things. You're not supposed to pull fire alarms and shut people off because you don't like what they're saying. You're supposed to have someone from your side who can calmly and reasonably and, in a way that's encouraging to other people to think the way they're thinking.
Yeah.
Like you have to be persuasive. There has to be something about what they're saying that go, wow, that guy's making some really good points. Or wow, she just shut all that down. Now I'm thinking about it differently. Like that's like a beautiful part of education is that you might have somebody like how many people out there, like wasn't Ronald Reagan at one point in time? I think Ronald Reagan was like, he was so left-wing that he was investigated by the government. See if that's true. I think I've read this, that Ronald Reagan at one point in time was like a hardcore lefty.
He certainly was lefty. I don't know how hardcore, but yeah.
I think he was a hardcore lefty. And I think during the McCarthy era, I think somewhere around then, I think he was even investigated.
Yeah, okay.
He's been obsessed with
I think that's true. I'm not sure if it was during the McCarthy era, but he was a really hardcore left-wing. He changed his mind. People, and how do you change your mind? You change your mind by evidence, by interacting with people that have different opinions that you didn't consider before, and now you do, and you have to be honest about your ideas and mull them over in your head and figure out, why do I think this way now?
So one thing about sort of this broad education, I was mentioning earlier John von Neumann, who's this kind of polymath. He's an expert in so many things. He's a generalist. Joe, many of the biggest scientific innovations have happened at the intersection of interdisciplinarity, because many of the biggest scientific problems necessitate expertise in many different domains. So the mapping of the human genome could not come from only one discipline. It took biostatisticians and biologists and medicine, all kinds of different expertise to put it all together. And so one of the things that I've been trying, certainly in my own research, medicine, marketing, psychology, behavioral science, and evolution, I've lived my life as an interdisciplinarian, but we don't train our students to be this way. Right? You are an accounting major. Mm-hmm. You are
stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane. You stay in your silo. As a matter of fact, our universities are architecturally designed so that we never speak to people who are. If you are in the psychology department, you never talk to someone from the finance department. But what if we were to speak to each other to study the psychology of personal finance? Now we've just created a synergy that we never thought of before, right? So one of the things that I'm hoping to do with some of the universities that are interested in becoming an author is to build something that I've long dreamt of, which I call the Consilience Institute. Consilience. Have we ever talked about consilience on this show?
I don't know.
So even if we have, let me repeat it. So consilience is a term that was sort of reintroduced to the vernacular by E.O. Wilson, he recently passed away, a Harvard entomologist. He studied social ants. In the late 90s, Joe, he wrote a book called Consilience, Unity of Knowledge. So consilience refers to, are you able to create links between disciplines? Can you create an organized tree of knowledge? So he was arguing as well that evolutionary theory is the meta-consilient framework that can link many different disciplines. So for example, you could study literature using evolutionary theory. And this field is called Darwinian literary criticism. Can you guess what that might mean? Or just jump?
Yeah, just jump.
Okay. So Darwinian literary criticism means when you study certain literature narratives that are still with us time, the reason why they pick up fantasy is because at their base they have certain universal themes that map onto evolutionary, right? Paternity uncertainty, sibling rivalry, romantic jealousy. So in other words, there are 6, 7, 8 key evolutionary templates that drive much of the great literature, whether it be Arabic literature, whether it be ancient Greek literature, whether it be Japanese literature. There's always that same template, and that's why they are sent. That's why I understand what an ancient Greek poet had wrote 2,500 years ago, and I get how he's feeling jealousy, because you and I are running the same softwares that guy did. And so that would be called Darwinian criticism. You could apply evolutionary theory to architecture. Okay, so I'm trying to give examples that you wouldn't have thought of. So architects usually are trained in how to design buildings to minimize costs and maximize the speed with which you can build a thing. They're not trained to design buildings that are consistent with our biophilic nature. Biophilic means love of nature. So there are certain architectural designs that actually make us be more productive. I'll give you a simple example. Just having more windows increases productivity. As a matter of fact, there was a great study that was published in maybe Nature or Science, one of those two journals. It's in 1984, I think, where the researcher did only the following experimental manipulation. Half the people who had just done surgery were placed in a room with a window, and the other half were placed in a room without a window. Everything else is fine. It's the same surgery. So the one that was in a room with a window had many better outcomes, different metrics. Just that one manipulation, being able to see the light, right? So there are also, by the way, there's a theory called biophilic architecture, which tries to incorporate our innate love of nature in the design of architectural, buildings or interior spaces and so on. So that would be another example of using evolutionary theory in a completely different field. You can use evolutionary theory in medicine. You could use evolutionary theory in consumer behavior. And so I argue that we can build an institute called the Consilience Institute, where filmmakers from Hollywood can come to this institute and do a 6-month stage studying about how to develop scripts that adhere to evolutionary principles. And evolutionary computer scientists can also come in. What's unifying all of us is an understanding of the importance of evolutionary theory in these very disparate disciplines.
That's fascinating.
Pretty cool stuff, huh?
Very, very cool. It's always so interesting to think of what are the motivations of human thinking and how where we trip on ourselves, where we trip on our own programming, essentially. I mean, you're essentially operating with a system that was in place back when we were hunter and gatherers. We have the same system.
And that's, by the way, called in evolutionary medicine, the exact words you just said, it's called the mismatch hypothesis. The argument is that many of, and I know you're very interested in health, so I think you'll like this. This is not my research. This is from other evolutionary medical guys. I think the top 9 killers of health are related to the mismatch hypothesis, which means that something that could have been perfectly adaptive 100 years ago in the modern world becomes maladaptive. So, for example, and hence the mismatch. So, whether it be colon cancer or diabetes or heart disease or so on, what ends up happening with each of these diseases is that misalignment between what was evolutionarily adaptive back then and evolutionary maladaptive now creates that health condition. Let me give you a concrete example. We've evolved the taste buds to prefer fatty foods, because of caloric uncertainty, caloric scarcity. That makes perfect evolutionary sense when, as a hunter-gatherer, I have to spend 30,000 calories to go out and hunt, and I may not get game. But then when I do get the game, then I gorge on that meat because I don't know when I'm going to eat next, right? In today's environment of plenitude, I don't face caloric uncertainty and caloric scarcity. I become fat. I overeat because that mechanism of gorging on fatty foods still is in me. Mm-hmm. So we still have that mechanism, but it becomes maladaptive. Mm-hmm. And so incorporating an evolutionary lens into medicine often ends up with completely different medical interventions than that which the typical physician who's not trained in evolutionary medicine would have come up with.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, so many doctors don't even take into account so many factors in health. And this thing that you're talking about, this desire for fatty foods, is that's a great example. And you know, one of the best ways that people have found to sort of mitigate the effects of that is to only eat food. When you go on one of those carnivore diets, one of the things that's so interesting about it is you naturally limit the amount you eat. Your body achieves sort of a homeostasis with food because you're not consuming, like, I can sit down and eat a steak alone, and I'll be fine. But if there's mashed potatoes with gravy, or there's some pasta, or there's a piece of bread with some butter, like, I'll go in. But if I'm only eating steak, I don't feel the need to eat anything else. I'm fully satisfied. I'm not starving. No, oh my God. It's like I've had plenty of food. That looks good. And that is just the trick. That's the trick. But if you can get past that trick and just be disciplined with your diet and eat as much as you want of eggs, fish, and meat, and you will lose weight, like, in a shocking way, and you'll feel a lot better. And it's kind of disturbing.
So are you on an all protein diet right now?
I'm like 90%. Every now and then I'll eat a cookie. Like, I'm not ridiculous. Like, I'll have tacos. If they're, I love tacos. Good, solid Mexican taco.
Right.
But it's like, I know the reality of what food is. Dessert is just fun. It's just mouth fun. It's just mouth pleasure. So it's like, oh, this is so good. It's tiramisu delicious. I love it. But that's just because I like it. I like going to a restaurant and a great chef cooks you a great meal. I don't think, oh my God, there's gluten in it. I'm not doing that for nutrition. I'm doing that for enjoyment. This is for passion and love and a glass of wine, good conversation with friends, and, eating delicious food. You're taking part in a pleasurable experience that's essentially art that was created by a chef.
Right.
So that's different. But when it comes to food, like what do I use to fuel my body? It's mostly meat, mostly wild game and ribeye steaks.
Yeah, that's what I had a ribeye yesterday.
I need fat, I need a lot of protein, and then I'm good. And if I just do that, my brain operates better, my body feels better, less inflammation. The brain fog is crazy. When I went back to the carnivore diet, I took a lot of time off, and then I went back to it. I was telling Jamie, I was like, dude, I feel like I have like a whole nother gear. Like, I don't search for thoughts as much when I'm eating.
It's palpable.
Yeah, well, for me, it's because I have so many conversations with people. I know when I'm off. I know when I'm like, oh, I'm slow. Like, if I just flew in from fucking Italy or something like that, and I'm tired, and I'm jet lagged, it's a little harder to get my ears. I don't feel like I'm at my best. And I always notice the difference when I'm eating well. Always.
Right. What are your thoughts on, and I know very little about this, so I'm really asking because I don't know anything about it. All that Ozempic stuff. Are you for it? Are you against it?
I think if you're morbidly obese, it's probably a good idea to do something that helps you get going.
Because even if the side effects are bad, it's better than you're going to die.
Bro, you're dying.
Yeah.
If you're 500 pounds, you're fucking dying. You have all the comorbidities. You probably have diabetes. You probably have all sorts of shit wrong with you. You can't be that big. And if you just don't know what to do and you don't know where to turn and your habits are so deeply ingrained in your psyche that you can't pass up ring dings and you can't stop eating sugary cereal or whatever the fuck it is that's your thing, Ozempic is probably a good way to get going. I wish people would just get going with discipline and they would just get going with food choices. I would like that.
Yeah.
But goddamn, that's hard, especially if you're so far down the road, because it takes a long time. When someone says, like, how you like, you gotta stay. That's the thing, right? I'm 57 years old, but I worked out like this when I was 17.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't do anything different. I keep this thing going. I keep the party rolling. And I never let it get fat. Because I've gotten fat before, but never out of shape. I just got fat because I ate too much food.
Right.
I've never gotten to the point where I wasn't fit. I wasn't exercising. I don't think you should ever let yourself get there because it's too fucking hard to get back. Now, if you've gone 39 years of your life doing nothing and just eating potato chips and drinking Mountain Dew, and now you're 500 pounds, you don't know what to do. You're looking at a long journey. You're looking at a long journey to getting healthy again.
Yeah.
It's a long road, and it's hard to do a long journey because you're not going to see it every day. You're not going to see any results. You're going to look in the mirror, you still see all this extra meat and fat. You're going to be disgusted with yourself. You want to look like the guys at the gym. It's going to take forever.
Well, I wonder, I mean, I guess we can calculate that, but for every amount of weight that you put on or lose, what's the ratio of the speed? Meaning, it only takes me 3 weeks to put on 10 pounds if I eat badly. Let's suppose that number were 3 weeks. What's the number, the temporal number, the time number of how long it would take me to lose 10 pounds? It's probably 3, 4, 5 times that. So that there's...
Well, it depends on what you're doing. Okay, right. So it depends on how you're losing the weight, and it depends on do you have multiple things going on simultaneously? Like, have you started exercising? Have you stopped drinking sugary sodas?
Right.
Have you changed your diet completely? Are you getting enough sleep?
Right.
All those things factor in. Getting enough sleep is a giant factor. One of the times that people make the worst food choices is when they're tired.
Yes.
I know that for a fact. If I come home from the comedy club and it's like 1 o'clock in the morning and I'm hungry, I fucking eat everything that's there. I eat everything, dude. I'll eat cookies. I'll eat whatever the fuck I want. Because I'm like, I want to eat what I want to eat right now. I'm good most of the time. Tonight, we're having spaghetti. You know, I'll cook a pot of spaghetti. But the tired is one, but it's like, what are you doing to mitigate this, and have you changed your mindset? And if you haven't, if you're kind of dabbling in losing the weight, how long is it going to take? It might take a long ass time. You might not ever lose it. You have to like get into calorie deficit.
Yeah.
Calorie deficit is hard. So here's the thing though. You can't starve yourself, because some people do it the wrong way. They go too extreme and they fucking starve themselves, and which is fucking dangerous. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
It's dangerous for your heart. It's dangerous for your mind. It's dangerous for your body. Your body starts to eat itself. You know, there's a process. What is it called? Autosis? What is it called? I forget what the process is called. Where your body starts eating its own tissue to stay alive.
Yeah.
And that's what people are doing when they're on Ozempic, unfortunately. And this is the thing where people that are just a little overweight that get on it disturb the shit out of me.
Right.
Like, you lazy fuck. Just go to the goddamn gym.
Yeah.
You lazy fuck. You're 10 pounds overweight and you're going to get on Ozempic? That's so crazy. Autophagy.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought you were talking about, yeah.
Wait, go back to that again. The body breaks down its own tissue to survive. It's called I never heard that word before. Marasmus,
yeah.
Or muscle atrophy can happen when your body's deprived of nutrients or oxygen, or when cells are damaged.
So remember earlier I was saying how you can incorporate evolutionary thinking into all kinds of areas. So there's these great studies that were done looking at how the human mind can be tricked because of its desire for variety seeking. And then I offer an evolutionary explanation for it. But let me tell you the two studies that I have in mind. I think because when you mentioned spaghetti, it triggered that in my head. So in one set of studies, they took, I think it was M&Ms, and you know M&Ms you could create a bowl with only one color M&Ms, or you can create a bowl with many colored M&Ms. That colorant, objectively speaking, doesn't alter the taste. It doesn't alter the smell. So it is only perceptually it affects it in that your eyes see a different color, but it doesn't alter the gustatory experience. And it turns out that when you offer people the multicolored bowl,
they eat more. I wonder if people that are colorblind make better food choices.
You just there's your research project.
It's kind of interesting.
That's
right?
kind of cool.
But some things that are brightly colored are really good for you. You know, like peppers.
Yeah,
You know, like
absolutely.
bell peppers. You know, like pretty bright red, and they're pretty.
Yeah,
you know, apples.
Sure.
Oranges.
Although there are some cases where, and I want to study in a second, but there are some cases where colors in nature are called. This was actually my first book in 2007. I talked about aposematic color.
Sure, just to warn you from
exactly.
Yeah.
So then and then I use it to explain the hair coloring of all the woke stuff. They say that that's a form of aposematic hair coloring. so check this out. So the Amazonian frog that lives in a very dangerous neighborhood, you'd think that it would evolve camouflage, and yet can see it from a satellite that's so brightly yellow or red because it's saying, hey, idiot,
Listen,
if
bitch.
you could see me, sort of say, why the fuck?
Yeah, I'm not even trying to hide. That's how dangerous I am.
Here's the beauty of nature. Another section will that helps you, and it will evolve it, but it's completely harmless. But the predator doesn't know which is which. Do you get it?
Ah, yes.
So,
right.
So I use that mechanism when I'm talking about deceptive signaling, and I use it in the context of deceptive branding, where people, Canal Street in New York City is all about you going and buying a Prada bag that should be $5,000, but hopefully if they faked it well, I can buy it for $50. And so that's how I take all of these biological examples and try to apply them in economic or consumer decision making. But let me go back to variety seeking.
Please do.
So you mentioned earlier spaghetti. So they did another study where they took the exact same pasta and they either gave it to you in a plate of one-shaped pasta or in a plate of multi-shaped. But it's the same pasta, so it doesn't change anything. But I can give it to you whatever Marcella or did, and guess what? They ate more when it's the multi-form pasta.
That's interesting.
Isn't that cool?
You know what's interesting too? You just brought up brands. Like brands are interesting. It's really fascinating how brands have status attached to them, and people are so attached to acquiring these brands that they'll have fake ones.
Of course.
And the fake bag thing to me is the nuttiest one, because it's just a bag. It's not a fake Ferrari. Like if you buy a fake Ferrari, you're gonna notice the moment you start driving. Oh, this thing's a piece of shit.
Right.
It's not gonna handle well. It's gonna sound terrible. Won't be fast. A real Ferrari, it's like what you're buying. You're paying for the engineering of this magnificent piece of technology.
Well, most people are buying to show off.
They're doing that too.
Yeah.
But the rich people aren't stupid. All right. The reason why Ferraris are so expensive and they sell so many is because you buy them, you go, holy shit, it's worth it. The reason why it developed this grand status is because they win races. Although Lewis Hamilton drives for Ferrari. That's why they sell Ferraris, because Ferraris are the shit. You know, but also I would
by the way, do you know that the uppers usually, and you've met many of them, don't drive Supras?
They get like a regular portion out of the turbo.
Not even that, maybe. But do you know why? Do you know why? From an evolutionary.
They have to hide. They're hiding a little bit. They're camo. They're like the frog that pretends to look like the leaf.
Perhaps. But it's because when I'm nouveau riche, I just entered that thing. I want to demonstrate that I'm the real deal.
Right.
And for many other people who are in my circle, they may not be able to afford the ostentatious $350,000 Ferrari. Right. But when I am an upper in the billionaire class, then me driving a $350,000 car is not a costly signal in a biological sense of my worth, because every single member of my billionaire friends group could match that signal. Right. Therefore, the way I can then compete with my billionaire friends is if I can spend my money in a lavish, wasteful way, such that I buy an art piece that a monkey could have come up with, and I pay $180 million of it.
Right.
That makes me big dollar, because you don't have enough money, Joe, to be able to buy what a monkey, and I pay $180 million. Both of us can buy the Maserati. Right. And so that's where I use the principle of costly signaling from biology to explain ostentatious behaviors in consumer behavior.
God, that's the dumbest thing. Especially modern art class.
Can't stand it.
I used to go to LACMA, the LA Modern Art Museum, and I would get angry. Like
I've done the same thing.
Just pure.
Because you're feeling that they're cheating you from the experience of seeing real art.
This is not art. Yeah. There's one of them is literally a plexiglass box that's sitting on the ground. I'm like, you dumb motherfuckers. You dumb motherfuckers. Meanwhile, if you go on Instagram, you find amazing art. There's so many artists out there, like legitimate, incredible artists. Like what you're doing is bullshit. Like one of them was a video of people playing catch. That was their art. Like, fuck you.
That's postmodernism, by the way, right?
Fuck you.
There are no objective aesthetic standards.
Yeah.
So anything goes. So in the parasitic mind, I have a section where I talk about. So like you